Okay, this is where we're going to get into the meat of the issue. This is the fourth tutorial in the series, and what we're going to talk about in this one is how you actually make a genuine object. An object is not just points and lines and even polygons. An object is something that you're actually working on and going to use at some point. And so what we've done so far is the building blocks of that, but to actually make an object officially is a little bit more. So here is the basic layout once again. And so let's say that I want to base this object on a box. And so I'm going to use the primitive to create a simple box. And in this case, I will be relatively simple. Now, what I want to do, let's say I wanted to make something like let's say one of those fidget spinner things or a dice or something like that. So I'm going to hit the numeric pad, hit the N key. And in this particular case, I'm going to give it some segments, but not very many. I want to keep it relatively simple, and I am going to give it a rounded edge, let's say. So you can even make that a little bit more pronounced, and so it's got a rounded edge there. And most importantly, I'm going to give it a consistent cube shape. So in this case, I think I'll just make it that, say 4 units. And so there's my cube. And so if I look at it over here, there it is. So, well, let's just give that a little bit more of a rounded edge, and that's fine. Okay, so nice rounded cube. Okay, so the next thing we're going to introduce, and let's say I'm happy with that for the moment, I'm going to turn off the numeric pad. Now, one thing I forgot to do was center it, so I'll turn the numeric pad again, and I'm just going to get 0, 0, and 0. So now the cube is locked in the center of three-dimensional space. I'm going to turn off box. Now here's where it gets a little bit different. Up here in the upper right-hand corner of the program, you will notice a series of little bitty tiny check boxes, and usually only one of them is lit. These are layers. This is layer 1. Now, if you click on the next one in line, layer 2, what happened? Everything disappeared. That's because these are empty dimensions. These are empty layers. Now look, you'll see that layer 1 has a little bitty corner there. That's where the stuff is. So let's go back there. That's where this is. And if I wanted to add something to a different universe than this, I can go over to layer 2, and I can put layer 1 in the background. So let's say I hit the little bottom corner of layer 1. Now I can see layer 1 is kind of like a shadow universe of itself, and that's my cube there. But I'm in layer 2. And so the reason why this is important is because you can make compound objects by adding things in different layers, and that way you can edit only that layer and you don't have to worry about messing up the other stuff. So let's say layer 2, I'm going to put a ball. And let's say I'm going to put that right in the center there. And I'm going to move that there like so. And I'm going to move this ball so that it corresponds with that edge there. Now, if I turn on both layers, what I will see is this. I now have a box with a bump in it. And so that's really useful under some circumstances. Maybe that's what I want. I can move that wherever I want it, and that's considered part of the same object because the object now has 2 layers. So what happens if I want to make that like a gouge? Well, what we do, let's say we go back to layer 2, put layer 1 in the background by clicking the little bottom piece there. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off ball. Now this is another thing that didn't come up before. If you don't select anything on any layer, if nothing is selected at all, that means everything is selected. So if I modify move, I can move that ball without selecting any part of it. I get the same effect if I selected the whole thing, but in this case it's just a little easier. So I'm going to stick that there on the edge, and what I want to do is I want to modify one with the other. And so the way I do that is I put the first object in the foreground, and I put the second layer in the background. So now we have this black ball here, this shadow ball, let's say. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a tab that we haven't used yet. I'm going to go over to Construct, and I'm going to go to Boolean, and basically I'm going to hit Boolean Subtract, and it does the math, and you can see that now suddenly this cube has a gouge taken out of it. Now, if I were to just go to that layer, you can see where that is. So this is how you could make a die or something like that. But the other thing that you can do with layers is that you can have elements with different components. Okay, so for example, this is an object that's a whole lot more complicated, as you can see, and this is supposed to be a futuristic flying car. And if you look around it, you can see that it's got all kinds of different components, and this is designed to be 3D printed, so this piece here is actually supposed to be broken off later. But if you were to look at the layers up here, you'll see loads of them. In fact, there's two banks of them. You can have as many layers as you want. But if you were just to grab, say, the first layer, you'll see that that's nothing but the bottom chassis. The second layer is part of the dashboard. The third layer is the little pitons or the pontoons it sits on. So each layer represents a different part of this. I'll turn that in the background by accident. And so this way, you can actually build the thing piece by piece. And if you hold down the Shift key, you can add the layers back into it and see what the finished product looks like. Make sure that those are. And now it can be tedious, which is one of the reasons why ultimately what you're going to want to do is merge these down when you feel like you've finished it. But you can always go back in and edit them later. So that's one of the reasons why this works. And you'll see that when you take your finished product into layout, you can actually just import it as all the layers and then move those independently, so you can have objects with moving parts. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention in this particular tutorial is you must always save your object. So just like everything else, go to the File tab, Save Object, and you generally want to give it a unique name, save it where you know where it is, and then you can always reload it later. But always save your object. In fact, you should save it frequently, of course. The object will be saved with all its layers. It'll be saved as a WLO file, Lightwave Object file. Always save it where you know where it is.